Good afternoon everybody and welcome back to Indycar. My name's Gordon Ross and I'm broadcasting today from a car park in Bearsden, and it's pouring with rain here. An absolutely miserable day, I'm afraid. Some of my viewers had suggested that I should do a programme which is a brief roundup of 2017, since Charlie Brooker is apparently not doing a year wipe this year. So just briefly, I've summarised a few things that have happened in 2017 and trying to look forward to what might happen in the coming new year. So I hope you've all had a very happy Christmas and have recovered from your Christmas dinners, and you'll be getting ready to fight a new fight for our independence next year. So what was 2017 all about? Well, to me 2017 was a year spent down the rabbit hole. It was British politics descending into a completely unknown zone, a fantasy land if you like, which nobody ever anticipated that we would inhabit. We're now down the Brexit rabbit hole and proceeding as fast as possible downwards. Article 50 is signed, there's no going back on Brexit. The Tories have decided it's going to happen. They're going to protect their tax havens by removing the entire United Kingdom from Europe. So the plan is for us to leave both the customs union and the single market, effectively wrecking all chances of free access to the market, and effectively ruins our export economy in Scotland by cutting somewhere between 10 and 25% of our export orders at a stroke. Also, Donald Trump has decided to destroy what the British call the special relationship. This is another British fantasy that somehow or other we are favoured by America. We are their favourite little nation and they help us in some way. In actual fact, the special relationship just means that the United Kingdom is a massive missile carrier offshore in Europe, which is just basically full of about 250 American nuclear missiles. So there is no real special relationship, and Donald Trump has yet again proved that he is definitely not your normal American politician. He this year decided that Bombardier, which is a Canadian firm which builds airplane wings in Belfast, is now going to have to pay 400% tax on any Bombardier orders for airplanes by American firms. This has threatened the jobs of hundreds of people in Northern Ireland, which, if you remember correctly, is actually a part of the United Kingdom. What's being done about it? Well, nobody knows. Since Bombardier's contract was subject to this massive increase in taxation, nobody has said a word on the British media about the jobs of those at Bombardier's factory in Northern Ireland. So I cannot tell you what's happening, but I think it's fairly easy to guess that there will be job losses as a result of this, because the orders to America for Bombardier planes will simply stop happening. Okay, what else has happened? Well, a beautiful new Scottish bridge has been built across the River Forth. The Queensferry Crossing, as it's known, a three-tower cable stay bridge, the largest cable stay bridge ever built actually in the world as far as I know, and it's a beautiful structure compared to the existing Forth Bridge, which is looking a little bit dowdy now and past its best. So that was another Scottish success story of 2017, and sort of going along the same theme as that Scottish success, we've also seen the introduction of the famous baby boxes. These are a huge box of goodies, useful items, nappies, bottles, all kinds of baby stuff that people normally have to spend hundreds of pounds buying themselves, and especially useful for single mothers or those living in poverty who can't afford some of the basic things that they need for a new baby. So another great positive thing from the Scottish Government. Now, interestingly, this is a piece of news most people aren't really aware of because the British press doesn't report it. But Russian forces have now defeated ISIS in Syria, and they have all basically been chased. Raqqa, their former capital in Syria, is now being emptied of ISIS fighters. Up to 2,000 fighters who still remain standing and alive in the city were bussed out of Syria just a few days ago, which means that the Russians have effectively done what the British, the Americans and the Europeans have failed to do in Syria, and actually beaten ISIS and removed them. So a nice bit of news for the Russians. Well done, Russia. Okay, that brings us again to something else Russian, and that is the new television show which Alex Salmond has got on RT, Russia Today. Now, there have been criticisms of his choice of television channel, but if you think about it, he didn't really have a choice of television channel, did he? Because the British media would not touch the Alex Salmond show with a barge pole, because the British media is essentially British and it does British things, and to have somebody on its channel who is basically against staying in the British Union and wants Scotland to be out of the British Union, that would be anathema to the British media. And so Salmond didn't have a choice about which channel he sold his show to, but remarkably he has formed his own company, he has his own directorship, he writes his own scripts, he does all the work himself on his own show with the help of Tasmira Ahmed Sheikh as his what should we say, second in control of the show, and both of them doing this two-hander produced a remarkably good formatted show where he has guests, political guests on, allows them to speak freely, doesn't interrupt them and doesn't browbeat them, and basically it's non-confrontational, a very nice way to interview politicians and a way of getting much more detailed information and more sorry about the interruption there, I just lost the signal for a moment. Anyway, to return to the subject of Alex Salmond, his show's been a huge success, and of course the media furore over it has just fueled that success by making people watch it all the more. He even managed to scoop a secret interview with the exiled leader of the Catalans, Mr. Puigdemont, and Carles Puigdemont gave an excellent interview to Salmond on his plans for Catalonia and his insistence that the Catalan freedom movement is only ever going to be peaceful and will only ever use democratic means, despite violence forced on them by the Spanish police, who were bussed in by the thousands to beat up, to drag out and to hurt people as they were trying to exercise their democratic right to vote. Now there's been another election, and guess what? Carles Puigdemont's party has won again, and therefore everything has reset back to square one. The Catalans now have a majority of independent MPs in their own parliament, and they're back at the same situation they were in before they had their referendum. Now what they will do next I don't know, but I'm willing to bet you that there must be another referendum, and this time the result of the referendum must be respected by Spain. There must be dialogue. Moving along, okay, what else happened in 2017? Well, the British media was incandescent about Salmond's show, as you know. They were absolutely aghast, and it was appalling, and that he was in the employ of the Kremlin and Putin's puppet and all this sort of thing. An absolute load of baloney that was. But the smear campaign against Russia that began is still continuing to today. It's still going on, and the smear campaign is basically trying to blame Russia for influencing both the election of Donald Trump and for influencing the vote on Brexit. Now, there's never been any proof brought forward by the people alleging this. There's not a shred of evidence been made available. Have you seen anything on the media which confirms the presence of Russian hackers during either the election of Trump or the referendum on Europe? Because I've never seen any, and I don't know anybody who has. Okay, moving along, what next? Well, the British government is actually trying to blame Putin and Russia for the Brexit vote, despite the fact that Brexit is a Tory policy and is being pursued by Tory right-wingers. Theresa May is a little puppet who's been put in charge of steering the ship while the Brexiteers get what they want, which is out of Europe completely with no deals whatsoever. We are heading for either a substantially hard Brexit or a completely hard Brexit. There's very little room for manoeuvre at all here. Also, the Queen seems to be taking a bit of a back seat this year. You'll notice that the two royal princes, Harry and William, have been on the television rather a lot, and it's even been revealed that they filmed several scenes in Star Wars dressed as stormtroopers in the hope of having themselves on the cast list. However, I understand that the scenes that they were filming were actually cut from the final film, so the two royals don't even appear. However, that hasn't stopped Harry being feted by the BBC in particular, and he was actually given the chance to produce a BBC radio show as well. And I think these are signs actually that the new royals will be Prince William and Harry, and I have a feeling that should the Queen abdicate, I think Charles will not take the throne, and I think they're grooming the two boys, the two grandsons, as being the new dynasty that we will see in the British media in the future. Especially with Brexit, they're needing a rallying point for a head of state, and a nice, handsome young man who's media savvy and has his own radio show and the rest of it is obviously going to appeal a lot to younger voters, and this is how the royal family is going to be presented in the future. So, what about 2018? How is it going to look for us? Well, hard to say, but I think it looks obvious, to me at least, that there must be now a vote on independence towards the end of this year, because if it's left any later than that, there is a danger that the Tories will gain enough power through their repeal bill to repeal the Scotland Act, which is the act which keeps the devolved parliaments in place, the underpinning of the Welsh, the Northern Irish and the Scottish devolved parliaments. They have their own acts. Now, if any part of those acts is repealed, then the Scottish Government's position is weakened. If they repeal the whole lot, then the entire Parliament could be closed down on the whim of the Tories. They could claim, and I'm sure they will do this, that it is just an expensive talking shop and should be closed down. Because they've got Brexit on their plates to deal with, and because of the losses that Brexit will cause, the Tories will see Holyrood as a prime target for closure. Just as they closed down our industries in the 1980s and sold them off, they'll be quite happy to close down our Parliament and make all of the people who work for it redundant, except of course, for Mr Mundell and the civil servants that he has under his command. Now, that itself would be a fate worse than death as far as I'm concerned, and I wouldn't want Scotland to end up with Mundell running it by himself. Can you imagine how Scotland would be with Mundell as Scottish Secretary with free rein to do what he wanted? It would be unimaginable. So what must happen is we must have another referendum. It's the only option now which makes any sense for Scottish industrialists as well as its people. If Scotland's industries are to survive and its manufacturing and exporting industries to thrive as they have been doing recently, then we must leave the United Kingdom before Brexit, because Brexit, unfortunately, will disproportionately affect Scotland. Because Scotland's economy is far more reliant on its exporting abilities than the British economy, we're more vulnerable to the Brexit damage. That's just a fact. It's nothing to do with politics, it's not to do with the SNP, it's just a basic business fact. Scotland is going to lose up to 25% of its export orders as soon as Brexit happens, and it's just simply because we will not be competitive in those markets. The Tories will try this. They will try to shut down the Scottish Parliament, and they will try to force Scottish manufacturers to cut wages, to make people redundant, throw them on the scrap heap so that they can continue with their Brexit. We are going to pay the price for 1.2 million people in England who wanted to leave the European Union, because that's the size of the majority. Out of 60-something million people in the United Kingdom, only 1.2 million was the actual majority in favour of leaving the EU. That was the difference, just 1.2 million people. When it comes to Scottish independence, though, the numbers are very different. Scottish independence support is running at 50% at the moment, and I can see it climbing higher and higher all the time. It has gained 5% since 2014. We started at 45% and it has climbed steadily all the way up to 50% now. Next year I can see it climbing higher as the Brexit harm starts to happen. As people's jobs start to go, inflation starts to rise, prices in the supermarket, you'll see them already going up. Particularly anything coming from Europe at the moment has suddenly gone up by about 30%. And that's without Brexit. That's before it's even happened, the prices have shot up. And this is because the pound has been historically weak. Now, the pound, remember, goes up and down. It's a market-driven price, and it's driven by people speculating on where they think the pound is going to go next. It's not driven particularly by Brexit, but it's driven by what the market thinks is going to happen to the value of sterling. It's not an indicator of anything. However, it will drop gradually as Brexit takes hold. Now, I've just about reached the end of the broadcast for today, and as a roundup, 2017 has really been the most bizarre year that I can ever remember in politics. But what I'm hoping is that 2018 will not be bizarre, that 2018 will be historic, for the simple reason that the Scottish people who, up until recently, sorry about that, I think I've got a few of the British nationalist goons working to try and disrupt my show today. But anyway, what I was going to say was 2018 I hope will be historic, because finally people will realise that independence is a better option than Brexit. Pulling out of the UK is a far better idea than the UK pulling out of Europe, for the simple reason that we can protect our businesses, we can protect our income, we can protect our surpluses, and we can be a perfectly happy independent country running ourselves with our own laws, with our own politicians, and without interference from London anymore. We can also demand the removal of the Trident nuclear missile system from the Clyde, and in fact all British personnel who wish to leave can go. And if any of the British Armed Forces who are Scottish and are patriotic and want to remain in Scotland and help to start a new Scottish Armed Forces, they're welcome to stay as well. There are lots of things that could and will happen with independence eventually, but the key ones are control. Control be back in Scottish hands, and that we will no longer be riding the tail of the Brexit tiger. We will not be attached to that anymore. We will not have to do what Britain says anymore. We'll be able to do what we want. We'll be able to trade with whoever we wish. We'll be able to have whatever relationship we like with Europe, and we will not be limited to hard Brexit. We'll be able to do our own deals. And our Scottish Government is very able to do that. We have experienced politicians, we have statesmen, stateswomen, we have experienced politicians like Salmond and Sturgeon, but we've also got guys like Mike Russell as well and John Swinney, all very experienced, level-headed, sensible people who are quite capable of negotiating with the European Union a better deal than we have now. I don't know whether it will be full membership or whether it would be a free trade agreement, but whatever it is, we will get the chance to vote on it ourselves, and we will not be hostages to another country's voters anymore. And that's what this is all about. It's about us being able to control what happens to our exports, us being able to control what happens to our immigration. There will be no more forced expulsions of perfectly happy, normal, everyday immigrants who've come into Scotland and built businesses, had children here, who've been kicked out for no other reason than some arbitrary number that the British government has placed on immigration. Scotland needs its immigrants, it needs people to come in and to build businesses, and that's what our new country is going to be about. It's going to be about welcoming people in, not keeping them out. And this is what's most important as far as voting for independence is concerned. The freedom that will give to all Scots to decide their future. And I'm saying all Scotland, because we will not have a head of state who is reigning over us. We will have sovereignty of the people. The people will be sovereign. The Constitution of Scotland is already being written, and in that Constitution the people are at the top. Then there are the politicians elected by us, and then there are the civil servants below that. The people will always be in charge of Scotland, not some woman who's a multi-billionaire with a great big glittery hat who only got it because of being born into a particular family. That age is over. It's time to move into the 21st century. And it's time for Scotland to pack its bags and say, look, we've had enough of being dragged down with your stupid ideas. We are sensible. We'll decide what we do from now on. And I would appeal, especially to other business people, to think about how your business will be affected by Brexit. Do you remember what happened to your business in 2008? Well, imagine that happening again because of Brexit, but not just for a few years, but for 20 or 30 years after Brexit, having to fight to get back the kind of customer base that you used to have, to try to fight to get back to the level of profitability that you used to have. And in some cases, you might lose your business completely because of Brexit. There might not be enough customers. There might not be enough people with enough money to buy whatever it is that you provide. And this is the biggest danger of Brexit, is the forced closure of businesses, putting people out of business for a minority special interest group in another country who want to be separated from that marketplace that we sell into. Anyway, I'll leave you with that. Next year is going to be a momentous year, and I would appeal to all of you who watch this show. I don't care whether you're members of a party or whether you've just decided that you might want to vote yes next time, but keep watching the show. I'm going to try and keep it straight and be straight talking with you. I will produce some more shows with more facts and figures, but not too many. I'm not going to baffle you with baloney. The idea is to give you sensible, accurate information on the reality, not on the narrative that you're being fed by the mainstream media. Instead of the fairy stories, the scare stories, the smears, and all the rest of that, I'll just give you the facts, things that are really happening behind the scenes that you're not being told about. You'll be able to make your own choices with all the information at your disposal, without the spin, without the shouting, and without any kind of racism or bigotry. I'm not going to stand for that. I've had various trolls on my feeds recently trying to entice me into arguments about racism, and about one in particular who was trying to goad me into coming out and supporting violence as a way of supporting independence. There have been all kinds of insidious little threads starting, and trolls are all over my feed at the moment, and obviously I am having an effect on the people who watch the show. So if I'm being successful enough to attract these trolls, then that must mean that what I'm telling you is important, and it's important enough that the British state media is worried about it, and the British state is employing these people by the thousands, it seems, to come online and start rubbishing this show, or to try and entice me into admitting that I'm somehow extolling violence or revolution or something like that. All of which is complete and utter rubbish. The only thing I will ever do on this show is encourage people to vote for what they want, and to vote for independence democratically and peacefully. Anybody who has any other ideas at all is not welcome on my site, and I won't be tolerating any talk of racism, bigotry or violence. Those will be removed. Anyway, I'm off. I hope you all have a brilliant Hogmanay. I'll be thinking about you all as I'm raising a glass of single malt on Hogmanay. So I will produce a new show once I've sobered up, and we'll come together in 2008 and start the fight for independence all over again. Remember, we've gained 5%. We're up to 50% already, and we haven't even started the campaign yet. There's no starting gun being fired. This has all been done by the grassroots. We have achieved a 5% swing since 2014. I think that's something we should all be proud of, and we need to get it going again. Another 5%, another 5%. By the end of 2018, I want to see at least 60%, 70% if possible, for independence. And then we'll go and we'll vote, and we'll do it this time. No messing about, no being divided by trolls trying to turn us against one another. We keep our eyes on the prize, and we vote for it. And we convert the people that we know to help them to decide to do the same thing. We have to save Scotland's economy. We don't have any other method of doing it. All right? There's no violent way that you can do this. The only way to save Scotland and its economy is to vote for independence in 2018, and I am hoping to heck that the SNP will come up with a date in the new year for this referendum, because everybody's primed up and ready. There will never be a higher watermark than this. 50% is the highest point our vote has ever been at in any kind of poll. And it's time now to take control, to grab the steering wheel and to steer ourselves away from the rocks of Brexit and into a future that we decide for a change. Not something that's decided by Tory billionaires down in London and by some woman sitting on a throne with a crown on her head who's only in that position because she was born into wealth and privilege. This is something in New Scotland which I would like to see the end of. Personally, I would like to see a republic. I know there will be people who want to retain the royal family. I respect them for that. We will have a vote on that eventually, I'm sure, as well, after independence. So many things we can do after independence. We can't do any of them until we are, though. Okay, have a good new year. I'm off home to see my wife, and then we've got to go shopping, do the basic things of life. hopefully the prices haven't gone up too much. Anyway, have a great new year everybody. I'll see you in 2018 and we'll continue the fight. Bye for now.